Hi, Laura.
Hi,
Um,
Jeff.
it's funny to say hi because we've been chatting for like, 10 minutes now.
I know
Anyway.
it's also weird that you didn't say I'm turning the recording on after you turned the
Oh,
recording
crap.
on.
We should start over.
We should.
I'm just kidding. I'm not going to do that. I turned the recording on. Um, let's do personal updates first. How is your life right now?
It is a little crazy hectic, which is, it was so like calm for so long, and now it's lots of stuff going on. We got a big project in our day job that feels like it's just sapping all of the energy from everywhere else in my life.
So, the never ending project.
Exactly.
The answer is you need to go up to a high window on a rainy night and scream into the wind moonbeam, and that'll solve the project.
I mean, obviously. And then
Say my
Falcor can
name,
take me
Laura.
away.
Say my name. That's right.
Say my name, Bastian. Um, okay, so every child who grew up in the 80s had to at some point take a necklace and put it across their
Oh,
forehead to
100%.
be the
Yeah.
princess.
And look in the mirror.
And
Yeah.
yes, and throw all of like the pillows and the blankets on the floor,
Uh,
like in her big throne of
yeah.
pillows. Because I mean, if you're gonna have a throne, it should be a huge pile of pillows.
Should be huge pie pillows. We're also all scarred by the death of that horse.
Oh my
None of
gosh.
us will ever live past watching that horse die in tar, quicksand. I don't even know what it
It
was.
was the mud pit. It was the
Yeah.
like the nothing pit.
Yeah. Just
Yeah.
absorbing that
Okay.
poor, innocent, sweet horse.
I know. Okay, so I have to tell you, my parents are very old school, right?
Yeah.
Very old school. And they want to show my nieces who are 5 and 7. They desperately want to show them the never ending story.
No.
And my brother and sister-in-law drew a hard line and are like, no. So
No.
my father asks me, thinking like I'm going to take his side and say, why can't I show this to them? I was like, well, we were all kind of traumatized by that.
Yeah,
And
none of us were
his,
like, oh, that's a great story.
I mean, yes, the movie was amazing and we watched it a million times, but all because we all wanted to cut school and find an attic somewhere.
Yeah.
Like, I was also really disturbed by the fact that he ate the whole apple core.
It's
Like
weird.
that was super
It's
weird.
weird.
But like this horse, right? Like anytime you talk about the never ending story, everybody talks about the horse.
Yeah.
My father's like, what? What do you mean? Drama? I'm like, Dad, the horse dies.
Yeah. They
He does
murder that
not
horse
understand.
for no reason. There's no reason for that horse to die in the plot. Just,
Except that Atreyu has to finish the journey alone.
yeah. But I was the horse actually helping Atreyu? No.
It
You didn't have
was
to kill the horse. You just let the
emotional
horse
support.
go.
But spoiler alert for anyone who hasn't seen the movie, at the end, after they defeat the Nothing, Atreyu is riding his horse again
He
at the end.
is. The horse is back at the end.
Yes.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, didn't help. Uh yeah, it's kind of like the Dark Crystal. I loved the Dark Crystal, but I could only really watch it once as a kid
I
because
don't
the characters freaked me out so much.
I don't remember the Dark Crystal.
Oh, it's a Jim Henson.
Oh yeah, we didn't watch
Yeah.
a lot of Henson in
Yeah,
my
it's a
house.
Jim Henson. And I learned recently, I can't remember if I was listening or reading to something, but Henson originally wanted all of the characters to only speak in clicks and grunts and there to be no dialogue
That is such a Henson thing to do.
because he was like, the puppets will do it all. The
Yeah,
puppets will carry everything. We don't need to understand the languages they're speaking. The
right.
puppets, and they actually made a version, like a sample version of it. And his like cohort of puppeteers were like, hey, Jim, no.
So funny. Well, fast forward 3 decades, and that's kind of what the Minions do.
That's true. That's super true. It's really funny.
Oh. So
Oh,
what's
yeah.
been going on with you?
My life, well, my daughter won her conference championship at college last night, so we watched the college championship
That's
game, which was a big deal.
fantastic.
Yeah, that was fun. It's their
Sorry you
fourth
weren't able
year.
to get up there to actually see it live.
Yeah, it's tough. Like, we kind of knew when she was going to New York that we're like, okay, our time to be up there will be limited. Thankfully, all the games you can watch online. So we watched
Nice.
yeah, it was great. And they soundly won, which was nice. And it's their fourth year in a row. So it's a four-peat for their conference. And now
Hmm.
they get to go to the national tournament. So that's exciting.
Fun.
Yeah. So that's a good thing. I think, I for 4 months I have been in house renovation hell, and it's
Yeah.
still it's still going.
But you're so close now,
I'm
right?
so close. The cabinets are in. They're putting the floor in a second time. They put the entire floor in, and they did all of the baseboards. And Wendy and I were laughing because, we've been fairly poor over the years, and we haven't really had a house that has like trim on the floor or like
Right.
molding on the walls. So they put that in, and we were like walking around, we're like, oh my gosh, we feel like adults. Like we feel like we're like adulting in a very positive way. Look at this, we have a real house. It has trim on the floor. And then the next day they came and they ripped it all out because they had made a mistake. It was the most demoralizing.
Oh,
It was like, oh, okay, you guys are taking it all. Okay, thank you for fixing your mistake, but can we? We got to take the whole floor out. Okay, everything's coming out. So yeah, and that's how the project has been. It's been like one step forward, three steps back. But we have cabinets. We have kitchen cabinets again. They're
without a countertop, though.
without a countertop. They're refusing to fully install my appliances, which I don't really understand. I like the guys that are working at my house right now, but their workday does seem to be 9:30 to 2:30. Every day at 2:30 they find some reason that they need to go get parts at the store.
Hmm.
And I'm like, you guys know that like 9 to 5 is the work day. Like that's like
Right.
there's actually like a song about it. Dolly sang it. There was a movie. Like there's 9 to 5, not 9:30 to 2:30. But again, they're doing good work, so I don't want to like. And I have talked to their supervisor. I'm like, hey, I'm not paying them till 5 because they're not here.
Right.
But he's like, yeah, no, I'm tracking the hours. Like so, it's yeah. But anyway, it's just very slow.
Oh,
Very slow. So we're cautiously optimistic that this week all of the construction will be done. We're cautiously now again. We thought we were much closer 2 weeks ago, and then they ripped everything out that they had done. They started back over from scratch. So we're cautiously optimistic that this week are 4 months of not having a place. And I don't live in a big house. It's not like I can lose my
right.
living room and kitchen and be like, I'll just go to the second kitchen in the den. Like, no,
Right.
we live in a small townhome. So it's like you lose a floor and it actually really hurts. So yeah,
Yeah. Well, especially with five people,
five of us. When the
four.
teenagers were home
Yeah.
over Christmas and Thanksgiving, it was seven of us.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a lot of
And,
like
your kids aren't little anymore. They take up adult
they
space.
take up adult space, especially the
Teenage
14-year-old
boys.
and the 17-year-old take up a
Yeah.
lot of adult space. And it's just like there's so much weird things you like every night I cook dinner in this like weird half kitchen. But then before they come back to do work the next morning, I have to spend like 45 minutes arranging the house so that I don't watch these construction guys waste an hour
Moving
just
all of
prepping
your,
to work.
yeah.
So like I'm trying to like keep them moving fast. So I'm like, all right, I'm gonna set up for them so they can just come in and start working. And it's just become a weird routine of like, oh, I lose so much time during my days now.
Yeah.
Or talking to them because I work from home. They're constantly coming downstairs to talk to me about things. I'm like, guys, I am at my job. I know that you don't. I know you work 9:30 to 2:30, but I actually work a lot. It's a complicated job. I can't.
Yeah.
And I don't. You don't need to ask me about. I gave you the door handle to put on the cabinet. I don't need you to tell me what template you're using to do it. I don't. I just do it. I don't care. So anyway, it's a weird.
Just make it look good.
Yeah, nobody cares about this. I'm just now ranting
No,
about
I think
first world
it's an
problems.
important
Yeah.
part of your life. Are you able to have the countertop measured now, or do you have to wait till they're completely done on Wednesday to have it measured?
Okay, so here's a microcosm of my life. They come on Friday. and we have ordered the kitchen sink. My wife was very excited about this very specific kitchen sink.
Right.
We ordered this very specific kitchen sink. Um, Actually, I need to pause real quick, Laura, because I
Sure.
think the dishwasher is being delivered. I'll be right
Oh,
back.
okay.
That was an active illustration of the chaos of my life. I can't. It's like, oh, look at that. The dog's exploding upstairs. They must be delivering the dishwasher. The time that they told me was a 7 hour window today. I have no idea when it's coming, but there it is. Yeah. Anyway,
So that was it?
that was, yeah, it's there. They put it in the kitchen and then they left.
Okay.
I was like, thanks, guys. See you later. But yeah, anyway. Yeah. So yeah, I'll tell this story really quick because I think it's funny. So Friday, I've got this old guy that, like, I've got a couple guys working at the house now, but one of them's this kind of old grumpy guy, and he's in charge of all the kitchen repair. And he's very fussy. He likes to do one thing a day. He's the one that actually drives them leaving at 2:30 every day. He's like, all right, I'm done. We're leaving. And so his son is the other one working at the house. So it's a father son combo. And the son is not pumped about working with his dad, which is really funny too. But so the dad,
So
I
this
have
is
a,
going to end up in your next book.
this is totally going to end up in my next book. So in fact, I'm thinking about a book where there's constant construction going on in the house that's never finished. So there's he, I have my sink delivered, and it's sitting in a box in the kitchen, and I'm telling him, I'm like, hey, the countertops are coming. Does the sink go in before or after the countertops? Because I don't know. I don't
Right.
know. If you want to talk to me about, like, writing a novel, I can tell you about that, but I can't tell you about, does the sink go in before or after the countertops. And this is the first time we've ever done construction in a house before, so I literally have no idea. So he's oh, I think after, I don't know. And he starts asking me all these words. He's like, is it overlay or underlay? Is it this or that? Or is it this or that? And I'm sitting in the living room, and I look at him and I go, Bill, I don't know what any of those words mean. And he's like, well, if it's this, it's after. If it's this, it's after. It's probably after. So he decides that day, he's like, I'm going to do it after the countertops come in. I'm like, okay, great, man. Like,
So
I,
for another 2 weeks, you don't have a sink in your
yeah,
kitchen?
yeah. And I told him, I was like, hey, I trust you. This is your job. I don't know how to do this. Like, so he leaves at 2:30, and I go into the kitchen and I look down at the box, and it says all of the words that he was throwing at me. They're all right there on the box that he was literally standing in front of. And so I get a call from the countertop people, and they're like, hey, we're coming in to measure for your countertops on Tuesday. The sink has to be in before we measure. So I called back the project manager, the boss guy, and I'm like, hey, boss guy, sinks have to be in before the measure. Your guy and I had a long talk about this morning. He was certain they didn't have to be in. I was like, I don't care. As long as they're in by Tuesday at 9, when they get here, it's fine. And the boss guy's like, oh man, well, he wasn't going to come on Monday. He was going to do something else on Monday. I was like, okay, good to know. And he's, and he's like, and I guess we'll have to get him there on Sunday or Monday. I don't know. We'll figure it out. You don't worry about it. We'll figure it out. I'm like, okay, great. Sounds good.
Oh my gosh.
This is a microcosm of my life. So, like, and I can't tell you how many times this has happened where they, like, have this conversation with me about, like, do you think it's this or it's this? This happens every day, and every day I'm like, guys, I don't know. I have no idea. I don't do kitchen remodeling. I don't do construction. I've never had the money to do this before. Like, this is a new thing for me. Like, I
Right.
don't think of me as, like, somebody who has no knowledge about anything. That's why I've hired you. You were
Right.
here to
Oh
help
my
me.
gosh. Yeah, your project manager should be the one who's like explaining these things to you and helping you understand what the options are and
Yeah, and he
not.
does, but he doesn't do it. He's not here every day. And part of the problem is I work from home, so I'm very accessible.
Yes.
If I wasn't accessible, I think what would be happening would he'd be calling me at the end of every day and be like, "Hey, here's where we got to."
Or they'd be calling you the same amounts. You just
Yeah,
wouldn't be, it
just
would be phone calls instead of,
I wouldn't be as reachable as I am. They
yeah.
wouldn't be able just to walk down the stairs and set my dog into chaos
Right.
every 35 minutes. Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah, anyway.
Hobbs is going to be such a different dog at the
He's
end of this
so
construction
anxious.
project.
He's already an anxious dog, and he's so, like, panicked.
Well, and
He
he
and when
doesn't like
people He
strangers.
doesn't like strangers, and when people come to the house now, it doesn't matter who they are. He immediately just goes to the basement. He's just like, this is what I do now. When people come to the house, I go hide in the basement. All right, poor dog. Anyway, that's Yeah, that's my life right now. And I'm thankful. Like in the end, we're gonna have a amazing new house out of it. This wasn't something we planned. Our like kitchen had a flood and everything was destroyed. So it wasn't something we planned, but in the end we're gonna have an amazing new
Yeah.
floor out of it. But the 4 month journey has been a roller coaster ride.
Yeah. Oh,
Lots
well,
of ups and downs.
we're pulling for you.
Thanks. Okay, let's talk writing stuff. So
Let's talk
we ask
writing
questions, and we ask for questions to give answers to,
and
and we
questions
got
were asked.
questions. Um, let's start. Oh, I'm going to start with. I'm going to do these out of order because that's how I
Oh,
roll.
oh, we're doing the
I'm
out of order thing.
I'm starting with the one that was asked specifically to you. All right, Laura. The question asker specifically said, "This is for Laura," which I'm not taking personally. Other
Well, you
than
also have to read that it said, I love asking this of non-authors.
the story's more fun for me if I don't read that part.
Oh my gosh,
Um,
you and Jason have this way of telling a story where I always look like the villain, even though most of the time I'm the hero.
yeah, that's right. Oh, Laura, you're not the hero that Gotham wants. You're the hero that Gotham needs. Okay, so other than a recommendation from someone, how do you choose to read a new author? Like, do you choose mood or genre first? What do you type into Amazon? Do you read the look inside before downloading? If so, what would have you say no?
I love this question. So, back before the internet, I would go to the library and I would just wander around until a book caught my attention. Sometimes it was the color, sometimes it was the size, sometimes it was the way it was sitting on the counter or on the shelf. I don't know. I would just find a book, I would pick it up, I would read the back cover, or I would open it up to a random page in the middle and start reading. When I got a little older and had a little bit of jingle in my pocket, and I could go to the bookstore, and really, we all know when I say jingle in my pocket, I mean plastic in my pocket.
Yeah, or you mean pennies?
I would wander around the bookstore in a similar fashion where I would just kind of like where whatever aisle felt right to me, I just randomly grab books off the shelf. And most of the time, I would just pick a random spot in the middle and read. And I'd give it a page and a half, 2 pages. And if I found myself getting to a place where I turned the page, most of the time I bought the book. Now, in the digital world, I am a huge Barnes and Noble fan. I am well in support of Barnes and Noble over buying books off of Amazon. However, I do shop my books a lot on both Amazon and Barnes and Noble. And if I'm looking for a new read, I will often go to like one of Barnes and Noble's lists. They have, I don't know, 10 or 12 lists running all the time of like books you should be reading. I go through and I click on almost all of them. If I've heard of it, I'll skip it, but otherwise, I read the summary. If the summary is interesting, then I go over to Amazon and I use the look inside feature on Amazon and I read the first pages. If I get to the end of the sample and I want to know more, then it goes in my Barnes and Noble cart. So that is my process. What makes it so that I don't say no, so that I don't actually go to like buy the book? Sometimes it's the summary of the story. Like if the story just doesn't sound interesting to me, then I'm not going to spend a lot of time reading it. Sometimes if it's that like, well, this could be interesting, I don't always base my decision on the summary. Most of the time I base it on the book itself. If I skip more than 3 paragraphs, I don't buy the book. I like to read for entertainment purposes. I am not a lit fic kind of person. I'm not really interested in The Sun Also Rises and other authors who see themselves following Hemingway. I just don't enjoy those books. For me, I really need to connect to the story and the characters, and I need to do it quickly. If
Nice.
if I'm not, because I don't have a lot of time to read, especially right now. So when I do read, I want to read something that I just am going to enjoy. So that is
But
how I pick books.
so in order to place you with like, because I know this question is going to turn like the next step of this question is like, well, what do you read? Because the
Hmm.
like, matching what readers look for with what they're reading. So who are your top four favorite authors,
So
or top two, or top three, whatever number you want?
so I do always start, like if I need a new book, I always go to my top 3 or 4 authors. But
Mhm.
most of my top authors are now at the point in their careers where they only put out a book every like 2 years instead of 1 or 2 a year.
Mhm.
So I've kind of like read through all of them. Um, I would say that I used to only read like suspense thriller for years and years and years. I only read suspense thriller. Now I would put myself in a more generalized mass market junkie. Like I'll read any genre,
Mhm.
but it has to be definitely targeted toward a mass market audience where it's like, I want to sell as many of this book as I possibly can. So I'm going to make it as engaging and hyped up and whatever as possible. Not to say that I don't read like romance and I don't read any of these others. It just has to really be targeted to
Yeah,
as
you're kind of
many
crossing out
people.
the extremes of like, I'm not looking for a hyper genre,
Nope.
if you see a bare-chested man on the cover that vaguely looks like Fabio and is like gazing longingly at, a woman who looks,
Who's
is in a
usually
period costume, you're like,
sitting
that's not
on
what
the
I'm looking
ground
for.
holding on to his leg for some
Yeah,
reason.
weird. Yeah.
She's never like his equal. She's always like looking up at him. Yeah. No,
Yeah.
I don't read
You
those.
look at those, you're like, that's a genre not for me. And then if you see another one that's like, Anne Patchett's The Dutch House, Pulitzer Prize winning, thoughtful introspective of what it
Yeah.
means to grow up as a child. And you're like, no, that's not
No.
for me either.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No. Usually if it's won some kind of award, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
If it's on somebody else's book club, that's not true. I do read a lot of those books, especially because those are the books that people tend to talk about.
Hmm.
So I like to, kind of be
Yeah.
able to talk with people on stories. But
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, I just look for. It's really funny because in television, I don't like character building stories because I feel like TV takes too long to build
Hmm.
characters. But in a story, if they're building characters in a way that I can connect to their life, I'm all in for it.
Yeah. Yep.
So, yeah,
Um, Good answer. Good answer. Uh,
I
okay.
love being able to talk about all the things that I do. But I always thought like the way that I picked books was weird because, I would see other people like reading the jacket and like thinking, no, just jump right to the middle.
Yeah, well, and just to compliment the question asker, I know I was teasing a second ago that I was left out of the question, but just to compliment the question asker, that's a super. If you have friends that read, asking them like, "Hey, how do you find a book?" Super important market research as a writer to understand like how do these people find books? How do they find a book that they're gonna like?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I have
Um.
a friend who is a huge, huge reader, like 4 or 5 books a week. And she spends a lot of time on Book Talk.
Hmm.
And when she sees something interesting, a lot of those, like, if you read this, you
Yeah.
have to read this. If you liked this, you're going to love this kind of things. I don't so much follow those. One, because my husband took away my TikTok account.
I
And
don't even
two,
want to touch that. I don't even. There's so many questions that I don't even want to know.
right? See, now I'm using his project his story, like making where he
Yeah, well,
usually
because
uses the
what people
villain.
may not know about you is there's no way that Jason took anything away from you.
So my food allergies have gotten super crazy over the last 4 months.
Oh, really?
Like
I didn't know that.
stuff that I have been able to eat my entire life, like chicken,
Yeah.
I am now allergic to.
Oh,
And it's crazy. And I'm supposed to go on this big 3-week trip over the summer. And my spouse, who, God love him, tries so hard to have influence over over me, looks at me and goes, I will not allow you to go on this trip if you do not go to the allergist and get a new EpiPen. I'm like, on what planet do you think you saying you will not allow
that's
me
so
to
funny.
do something is going to matter? He's like, yeah, I thought like if you knew I was so serious that I was going to forbid something,
I was gonna
like
forbid it.
he's like, you would know how
Um,
serious I was about this and how much I care. I'm like, babe, you went about this the very wrongest way possible.
yeah. Yeah.
So
Oh
now
man.
I refuse to get an accent just out of
Just because he
principle,
told you you had to. Yeah.
just because he was going to
Yeah.
forbid me from doing
Yeah.
something.
Yeah,
So
I am
anyway,
also married to a very strong woman, and the one way that I can ensure that she does not do something is I tell her she has to do it. She's like,
yeah,
"You can't tell me what to do." Like,
right,
all right,
right,
yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um,
He could have used any other technique. He could have guilted me.
yeah.
He could have, he could have,
He
like
could have
guilt
just
is a
expressed
huge.
deep worry and concern. You probably would have responded to that much faster than you would a demand.
Right, right. If he had been
Yeah,
like, babe, I'm
yeah.
really worried. I know you have this under control, but it would make me feel a lot better if I'd be like,
My
"Oh,
anxiety is
come
going to be a
on."
big problem if you don't.
Right?
Yeah.
All of these tools in his toolbox, and he chooses to use a sledgehammer. No.
Oh,
No. Yeah, anyway,
very funny.
so we'll see.
All right, well,
We'll
I'm
see.
I'm pulling us back to task. You pick the
Okay.
next question.
Ooh, ooh, ooh. Um, let's go with how to write dialogue in a group scene where
Ooh,
you have 6 or more people discussing a problem.
nice.
I
That's
like
fun.
this one
Yeah, that's fun.
because
Um,
6 or more people is hard.
yeah, it's a big you're yeah, that's definitely a big cast scene. I
Yeah.
would argue you almost need to make it into it. You need to group some of those people together. But do you want to tackle first? Or do you want me to go first?
No, I took the other one
Okay.
because it was specifically for me.
It was labeled for you. So I want you to imagine whoever asked you who are listening and wanted to answer this question. I want you to imagine yourself in a group conversation with 7 people. No one is like that conversation is probably being dominated by 2 to 3 people, and then the other 4 are participating um in a selective sense, and that they participate when they want to, and they're more listeners and commenters than they are drivers of the conversation. So first off, if you're writing a conversation that's 6 or more people, decide who the drivers are, who's driving this conversation. And so it's really a conversation between those 3 or 4. I would recommend keeping it to 3. And then and they have positions, they have personal stakes in the conversation, they have opinions in the conversation, they have things they want to see done. The conversation is important to them. And then your remaining characters are listeners, commenters. That's where you put your snarky character that only has quips to say. That's where you put your Groot, who's only going to say "I am Groot" on occasion in a conversation, right? Like any James, if you want examples of this, any James Gunn movie, Guardians of the Galaxy or the second Suicide Squad, any of those, he does this all the time. He'll have 7 characters in a conversation. 3 of them are talking, 3 to 4 of them are listening and making side comments. That's where you can start grouping. Now those, when I say you might want to make it into a chorus scene where you group characters together, that's just for the speed of the conversation. If you're giving everybody a chance to speak every segment, the conversation is going to feel very slow. So if you group a couple of them together in like these two characters nodded, or these two characters, like everyone around the table smiled, or so and so chuckled. If you can start grouping them into like common actions, it's just going to help you move that scene faster. Do remember that you never want to leave a character out of the interactions for more than a segment or two. So a segment is your like section of emotional consistency or topic consistency. If you change topics or change emotion, typically you're going to have some kind of small reflection in there to kind of break the interactions. Um, you never want to leave a character out for more than one or two segments. If you leave them out for three segments, the reader will kind of start to forget that they're there. So you want to find a way to engage all of these like passive side characters at least once. They need to make a comment, they need to use some body language, they need to interact with the group. You don't want like silent partners that suddenly appear after four segments. I like that idea, Billy said, and because the reader's like, oh shit, I forgot Billy was here. Like
Yeah.
it's that, you know, yeah.
And if you watch a Guardians of the Galaxy, when the cameras pan over
Hmm.
to the other people, or you get a quick shot of their body language, is exactly what you're talking
That's what it is. Yeah.
about keeping them in the scene.
Yeah.
Um, just to piggyback onto that, when I'm editing a scene like this and I am noticing that characters are getting lost, my kind of go-to fix on that is when you're changing those segments, when the
Yeah.
emotions are moving, that's when you do a quick pan over to the other characters, because it keeps everyone engaged without making it feel burdensome on the reader of like, oh, I have to remember where exactly all six of these people are.
Hmm.
Like you're saying, the three primaries, and then you get a quick glance at the others, and then go back to the three primaries. And that segment break is a really good time to do that, kind of like the way that you talk about using descriptive prose between
Yep.
emotional
Emotional
beats in
segments.
a
Yeah.
story.
Yeah, yeah, and it's that like if you want some comp examples of like who to read that's really good at this, Bachman's Anxious People, most of those scenes are 6 to 7 people large. He breaks them down. He'll have like a 6 person scene, and then he'll have like a 3 or 2 person conversation, which I also recommend if you're writing books that have these like large casts. Make sure you're varying. You don't want every conversation to be all 7 people because it gets
Yeah,
exhausting for the reader. It's fun, it's high energy, but using that much energy all the time is exhausting. So you need to like you
yeah.
want to break that group down a lot and get them into smaller. Bachman does that really well. I mean, we've talked about TJ Klune on the podcast. He does it really well in all of his books. VE Schwab does it really well in her books. She, breaking down her large groups, but then also like large group conversations are done very well in her books. Yeah, those are all comp examples that I'd say like these are really good. So I'm looking at my bookshelf to see if anybody
Yeah.
else pops out at me as like that has a huge cast and they manage it really well. Um, Nothing else comes to mind at the moment.
And if you're
The
struggling to figure out how to get those voices while Jeff is looking for other examples, finding reasons to take the group of seven down to a group of two. So,
Mhm.
right, like character A says to character B, "Come over here for a minute. Let's let's take this outside." Or you have a big family scene. The parents wait until the kids fall asleep
Mhm.
in on the road trip before they have a sidebar conversation. Any reason that you can to whittle down the group, don't just like ignore people. If you are intentionally having them leave, make sure you tell your readers that that person's leaving.
Yeah, that's something Grisham does really well. He'll have big casts, but rarely are the conversations in his books more than 2 or 3 people.
Yeah,
And people are constantly leaving scenes. And the conversation usually happens after the group has like whittled down to just a few.
yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that you mentioned Grisham because I can't read Grisham. There are too many characters. I can't keep the
Yeah,
cast
he has
straight.
too many characters, but he keeps them. It's interesting. He keeps them apart so that you don't have to have like. And I think it's that he's great at a lot of things. I wouldn't say he's great at big cast conversations. So he keeps his characters in groups of 3, which I think is really
Mhm.
smart. Yeah.
Nice.
Um, Good question. Okay, I get to pick next, right?
You pick next.
And then you have to start it.
Okay.
Okay. Um, uh, can you offer me any tips on a writer who normally writes in third person but now wants to write in first person?
Oh,
Little
I was hoping I'd
background.
get this question.
Yeah, I was going to give you a different one, but I'll give you this one. Little
Okay.
background to the question. I struggle writing first person because my eye interferes with the character's eye. I haven't tried the approach of thinking of the character in third person and then write the character in first person. Is that a strategy writers use? Yeah. So,
Okay.
any tips for moving from third person to first person?
I do. I have lots of tips. I love this
Nice.
question. My first question is, why do you feel like you have to write in first person? If you struggle to write in first person, feel empowered to write a story in third person. That's totally okay. There's nothing inherently better about a first person than a third person. So stick where your strengths are. If you really feel like your story is going to be made better by a first person point of view, my suggestion is to write a scene that you love that felt really easy to write and then go back and translate it into first person in the same way that you would go back and you would change a voice for any other character. You just change, you find the things about it, about this character's voice that are conflicting with your voice, figure out the differences, and then just use a simple like translation. In the last dash that we did, there was an exercise that kind of showed you how to change a voice with the different elements that allow you to kind of think about what you're naturally writing and how you want the voice to look at the end. You can use that exact same exercise going from your third person close to your first person. It is possible that you find after that exercise, it becomes really exhausting to write in first person because the narrative style really has to be in that first person's voice. Maybe if you're struggling with it, this isn't the right book for you to move into first person. Maybe you're better off finding a short story or a book where the first person's voice is much closer to your voice, not necessarily the same, but much closer, so that you get the practice of moving slowly from your voice to a different voice as opposed to going completely from one voice to another voice. But I would also just make sure that you give yourself some grace and know that this is not an easy switch. Some people hear voices really loudly in their head and it or very naturally to them to be able to start saying I for someone else. For other people, you see the world through a third person close lens. And that's great because there are amazing stories out there that are in both points of view. So, as an author, I would say, you know, just kind of find your sweet spot and go with it. If you really have done a lot of person and you really want to do first person, use the approach where you get your story out in your third person and then make your adjustments into first.
Yeah, and just to add to that, I think a lot of first person writers, especially newer first person writers, what makes it work for them is that the character that's in first person is them. It's they're writing their own voice. So it takes away that struggle this question asker, this dialoguer's feeling around how do I get the first person voice not confused with my voice? You write a voice that's just your voice. That's it's a as long as your supporting cast doesn't sound like you, it'll work. Yeah, anyway, good answer.
Thanks.
That's answer. All right, you pick next.
All right. When you are plotting or planning a longer series, for example, 7 books, because I know you've done this,
Yeah.
um, the character transformation, how are you satisfying that character arc for each book, but also for the series?
Okay. So plotting a longer series. Um, I think that the thing to understand about plotting a longer series is that the individual components have to work for the series to work. So you have to work each book plot. Like when you're looking at a longer series, you can have this longer narrative of like winter is coming and we're going to get to winter's coming and winter's going to show up, but each individual book also has to function as a good story. So there's a couple ways to go about it. If you're having a single like vehicle, single main character through the whole series, then you want to take that character through a series of steps of changes, and the arc of that character has to be huge. So they need to go from a nobody to, the king of the world, so that that journey takes 7 books to do. Does that make sense? Or the mystery they're solving has to be so big that it takes 7 books to unveil, or the villain they're battling, like the the thing they need to defeat has to be so huge. It's going to take 7 steps to beat it, right? Like so that's
Or
for
they
us.
need, sorry, let me just jump in
Yeah,
there.
yeah,
Or they need certain skills to be
yeah.
able to fight. So each book is building a
They're
different
building.
skill
Yeah,
so that they, when they get to the end, sorry, keep going.
yeah. No, that's super true. It's a good. No, it's that like that's that into that like they have to go through so much change to become the hero the world needs at the end. Um, so as you're thinking, and again, I'm talking, a focused kind of main vehicle, main character book. So that main character series. So like, and then some of those books you're going to want that character to fail. So if you think about the hero's journey in that timeline, you kind of have each book would need to have its own journey, and then for that character where they're learning something and they're transforming in a specific way, and then the total series also needs to have a we're moving from here to there. The key is to start the total series. The transformation of the total series has to be so huge it's going to take you 7 books to explain. So multi-character large series is like multi-main character large series are easier to plot, mostly because you have more characters to take up space and change. So the key is developing an arc for each character and then only telling a small portion of that arc in each book, or passing the who's the main vehicle in each book till you get to the series. So the kind of long arc over a series of multiple main characters, I would say, is kind of the Percy Jackson style.
That's
Percy,
exactly who
is
I
that what
was
you were going to say?
thinking. Rick
Yeah.
Riordan. He does this amazingly. Though, quite honestly, a lot of the young adult and children's authors who write series, Lemony Snicket does this
Lemony
fantastically
Snicket
in the
does it really
series of
well.
unfortunate events.
Yeah, with like the single vehicle character, like, there's a lot of examples of that too. The one that comes to mind that I'm not thrilled that comes to mind is Harry Potter. Comes to mind of like he has to go through so much change and the big bad is so big that it takes multiple books to get to.
Yeah.
The but the Rick Riordan starts with a single vehicle focus with the first 2 books, but then immediately moves into a multi-vehicle focus with his later books. And that multi-vehicle focus allows him to pull into the other main characters like Annabeth. When he gets to the Roman series, he brings in another vehicle there. And his vehicles of previous books will become kind of, in many cases, side characters to the new kind of establishing vehicles. And he'll take side characters from previous books, like the one that comes to mind is Nico from the I think Nico even appears in the first book. He might be in the I don't remember if Nico shows up in the first or the second book, but he and his sister show up. I think it's in the casino in the first book, and Nico becomes a vehicle character in later books. So that allows you to stretch the book to a long series, and those series can take kind of 2 forms. You can have the like, okay, we have a huge big bad or a huge problem we're trying to solve. That's what Reardon does with his like Chronos story. There's like an underlying story of steps in which they're uncovering the big bad, they're coming to understand the big bad, and then they're finally defeating the big bad. It takes multiple books to do that. Or you can have the like a group of friends on a journey, which is more the Lemony Snicket style, where like, hey, these are a series because it's the same characters. We're just taking them on a different journey. Like they're just on a different series of unfortunate events. Here's a new step in the series, and they don't necessarily need to connect. That we
There
need Count Olaf in everything.
is a big bad in all of them.
There
Count
is,
Olaf
he
is,
is, but he's more a like. There's kind of a reset. They're not like the
yeah,
books aren't like one long stream of defeating Count Olaf. It's like every book, it's like, hey, now we're resetting. Count Olaf is back, and we're defeating him in a different way. Like it's
right.
like, you
Because
know,
he's got a new plan.
he got a new
So,
plan. This time he's wearing a different wig.
right. He's
But
got new
there's
henchmen
that's
this
right.
time.
That's right.
Yeah.
He
Also,
does kind of
if you have
collect me
not
as
read
the
the
books
series
go.
of unfortunate events, it is amazing. Definitely, definitely go read it.
Oh, and if you're
Lemony
looking for
Snicket.
an example of a fantastic third party vehicle narrator who's like a narrator that looks down on the story,
Yes.
that is one of the best examples. The voice of the
Yes.
narrator almost makes the stories. It's
So
so great.
strong.
Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So anyway, those would be my two suggestions is that um the key to writing that big series is that you need something that stretches the series. Either it's massive character growth, a massive problem to overcome, and then just knowing that like what's connecting these stories, these series, is not necessarily the plot arc but how the characters are growing to overcome the challenges they're facing, how the characters are changing, because I think a lot of times we ignore how the characters are changing. And so I'd almost, whenever I'm working with an author who has a long plot book like that, I mean, you've probably seen me do this on podcast episodes, I'll be like, okay, who are they becoming over the whole series? Who do they become in step one? Who do they become in step two? Who do they become in step three? Regardless of the like style of your series that you're writing, that question's important to ask every time. Who are they becoming overall? And then what are the steps they take? And all the steps don't have to be forward progress. They can step backwards, right? Like you can have a book where they transform in a negative way that they then need to like recover from in the future books. Like so it's that, yeah.
Yep.
They
Agreed.
can learn wrong lessons. Yeah.
Agreed. Yep.
Um okay, I think I beat that question to death.
Wouldn't say to death, but I think it was good.
Yeah. Okay, here's one for you.
Okay.
Um when trying to establish characters, world, and show the normal state of life for them, how do you keep it interesting? This is especially tricky with fantasy considering the world building.
I love this. I love this question. So
We love all the questions.
we do. Thank you all for writing these questions in. They're
Yeah,
really fantastic.
dialoggers rock. Anyway, go
Yeah,
ahead.
that's right. Okay, so we think that it is tricky in fantasy because of all the world building, but the world building actually just gives us a really great opportunity to create dialogue. Think about in your normal everyday life, how often are you talking about the things in your world, right? Um, how often do we talk about the weather? Like they teach you small talk. If you don't have anything else to talk about the weather, talk about the traffic, talk about um so again, my spouse is in charge of cleaning the kitchen because I don't know how to clean and he's amazing at it. And just the number of times that I'll notice that he's cleaned something up in the kitchen or he's taking care of something and just saying something as simple as, hey, thanks so much for whatever, or like, I'm buying new curtains, right? So when they come in, likely when they get hung, he's going to be like, hey, I really like the new curtains. Like finding those everyday mundane things that your characters can talk about. Please don't Tolstoy and talk for 17 pages about the curtains. But like one sentence or two sentence exchange about, hey, I like what you did there, or hey, the traffic really sucked. It doesn't have to be quite that mundane. But if you're writing science fiction, while the characters are talking, somebody can hit a button on a panel and their body language can explain what's happening there. If you've got a fantasy story and you've got dragons flying around in the background while they're talking, maybe somebody goes, wow, lots of dragons out today, right? Like you don't, again, I'm not a writer, but you find something more interesting to say than a lot of dragons out. But like utilizing that same way that we comment on the world around us to bring dialogue into your story to allow you to explain the world to your readers. Lots of times we think that our readers need to know every single detail about our backstory and about the government and about the people and about the worlds and about the races and about the whatever. And most of the time, those things are secondary to the experience that your character is having. So allow yourself to slow build your world through your character's eyes.
Yeah, that's a great. I have nothing to add.
Okay,
Good answer.
excellent.
Um,
I would say Henline and R.L. Salvatore are fantastic examples of this. The way that like every one of their stories is in a whole new world, but there's not 17 chapters at the beginning of their story to tell you what it's like. Reading some of those old school sci-fi fantasy is a really great place to start if you're looking to have it.
totally. Yeah, totally.
Oh,
Um,
now you need one.
I need one. Now you got to throw one at me.
Okay. What if your vehicle's steps toward their true need feel repetitive? The people or the situations change, but the choice and the actions seem too similar.
Yeah, so I think that's an interesting question. It's you know the key to keeping, like I'd say, behind this question is a vehicle, is a main character who's has a kind of a singular change. So it's not a complex change. It's a pretty like they need to learn to trust people, right? Like, and so it is pretty simple, and like, okay, they're going to be confronted with somebody. They're either going to trust that person or not trust that person. It's either going to succeed or fail or succeed. Even in that little like 4 quadrant matrix I just made, they encounter somebody, they trust them, they don't trust them, they fail or succeed. Like you can kind of see the 4 quadrants there. You already have 4 different scenes that you can play with. They trust somebody, it fails. They're um under then you have a consequence scene where they've learned the wrong lesson. Trusting people is bad, right? They trust people, they succeed, they're challenged in what they're doing. They don't trust, they choose not to trust somebody, they fail, and ideally that pushes them toward change. They try not to trust somebody, they succeed, and that reinforces bad behavior, right? Like, so now you've got that 4 quadrants. Now to make that even more interesting, you change the amount of stakes, like how intense those are. You change the characters that they're working with. If it's an anchor and they find and it has negative reinforcement behavior, that scene's going to feel different. An anchor being a character that encourages the vehicle to be the worst version of themselves. If it's an anchor, that scene feels different than if it's an engine and they fail, because the character that encourages them to be the best version of themselves is going to have a different reaction to them succeeding or failing in their thing. So uh, just to say, like, even in the most simple character change, you have a lot of options. So like, you take our 4 quadrants and you go the 4 quadrants with an anchor, the 4 quadrants with an engine. Well, now you have 8 quadrants, right? And then you raise the stakes, low stakes change versus high stakes change. Now you have 16 quadrants, right? Like, so you got 16 potential scenes there that you can play with. I would say that if it is feeling repetitious, then you need a bigger change for your character. Yeah, if you got these 16 options and you're still like, yeah, we're still just doing the same thing over and over again, you either need to make the change multifaceted, and that, like, trusting people isn't enough. They need to trust and be vulnerable, right? Like, now you just took your quadrants from 16 to 32, right? Because there's a vulnerability quadrant in there now. And actually took it because you're adding a whole nother row. Jeff does math. You took it from six.
Yeah, it becomes a much bigger.
You did,
There's
it's actually
also
times three. Sorry. I'll stop with the math.
no more math,
Yeah.
this is writing.
Yeah.
No, also just to kind of jump in on that, I love what you're saying and the way that like you have the different setups. But I think there's also something about that you said in there that I think is really important. And it's that like lesson that they're learning is going to change the modulation of their voice at the end of the scene. So while it may seem like the beginning part of the scene all looks really similar, the modulation at the end
Hmm.
is going to make it feel really different. So if you are getting feedback from your beta readers that it feels repetitive, or you as an author are feeling like it's repetitive, go in there and just change the modulation at the end to push it more to success or failure or vulnerability or less vulnerability.
Yeah, and ideally, it's like, they're going to succeed in the wrong way and learn the wrong lesson. They're going to try to change and fail and learn the wrong lesson. They're going to try to change. Then the stakes are going to be raised a little bit to force them to go again. They're going to try again to make the change, and they're going to fail at making the change, but they're going to learn the right lesson, and that like this failure is holding me back, and then they're going to try and get a taste of success, and they're going to try and fail again, and then we've got the like dark night of the soul of I'm never going to capture it. They have the breakthrough to like, this is my true need, this is what I actually need to learn, and now they're coming back to. Yeah, and we should just say that true need, that language of true need, comes from J.P. Rindfleisch's story hypothesis, where he talks about characters have an initial want, a developing need, and a true need. And this is part of what also brings um, more variety to your storytelling. Is the initial want is where they think they know what they need, but they're totally wrong, and they fail. Even though they succeed in getting that initial want, still feels like a failure. And then because their issues aren't solved, and then they move to the developing need, where they're going to work on something for a bit. It's not actually what they really need, but it allows them to make progress in a positive way, which is that like, okay, I'm trying something, I'm succeeding. So in this case, your developing need might be trust, and your true need is actually vulnerability. You need to be vulnerable. So then they then stumble into, oh, I succeed in my developing need when I feel my true need for the first time. And then the real success comes in like embracing the true need. So even there, you're getting that three stages of diversity in your storytelling that allows you to just play with more things, and it makes the storyline more complex. So this is where plotting helps. Like, I know a lot of people don't like to plot, they like to just pants, and I'm whatever motivates your writing, do that. But this is where plotting helps, in that you can take a step back and be like, okay, what's happening in all of these scenes? Why does it feel repetitious? What tools of creating a more diverse experience for the reader am I losing? Right? Like, where am I missing out? And that's where you can build quadrants like me and do math. Anyway, do
It's a
math
great
poorly.
answer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I could keep rambling if we wanted to. Should I do more quadrant math?
No, I
No,
think we're
nobody
okay.
wants that.
I think we
Okay.
can go. We've been at this for like an hour now, so we
Have
should probably
we?
do
But
the
like
last
45
question.
minutes of it was me complaining about my dishwasher. Okay. Oh, I
It is
do. I will
interesting.
always remember the first time we ever did one of these. We got the comment on YouTube. Can you two just talk about writing? 45 minutes of nonsense.
And then 45 minutes of
Hey,
writing. I feel like that's a good balance for us.
it
Because
is.
it could be an hour and 15 of nonsense
Oh
and
man,
10 of writing.
you should see us when we're having a hard week. This has been a pretty flexible week. You should see it when things are difficult. We really are off the chain. All right, last question.
Okay, I'm ready.
Can you recommend a framework for finding the sweet spot between overwriting and underwriting during the drafting process? Overwriting means saying too much about things that don't matter. The reader has noise to filter out. Underwriting means leaving out the crucial pieces of information. The reader is having to rack their brain to fill this in the spaces that are missing.
Yes.
Go. Fix it.
Okay. So, underwriting, overwriting, these terms are subsets of reader burden. You've heard us talk on the podcast a lot about reader burden. Reader burden is when you're making your readers unintentionally think about something other than your storyline. Overwriting, you're giving them too much detail, going back to the world building. You spend so much time talking about the petals on the leaves of this exotic plant on some foreign planet that people have no idea what's going on with your story because you've spent so much time on this. Or Tolstoy, Anna Karenina, 15 pages on the curtains, and you have no idea who the main character of the story is. Who is this Anna Karenina person and what is she doing? Right? Like it's that overwriting is a distraction from your story. Underwriting is when you aren't giving the reader key details about the story. Lots of times authors do this unintentionally because they're making their characters make decisions that don't make sense to their readers, but make sense to the author because they know what has to happen at the end of the story. That's when authors do it like unintentionally. But then authors sometimes underwrite intentionally, which is really good if you are like writing a mystery, but it's really bad if the things that you are asking your reader to think about are not part of your main mystery of the story. So reader burden can be a really strong cause for somebody to walk away from your story. Again, tying it very back to the first question. If in the first 3 pages of the story, I don't understand what's going on, I'm not going to read any more of your story. Or if I'm so exhausted from understanding the circumstances where the story is going to happen, I'm not really interested in your story because now you've exhausted me on, right? So those are good examples of overburden and underburden.
Yeah, and I'll just add nine. Well, 9 times out of 10 may be a little much. 5 times out of 7, math. Um,
You love
I
math.
love math today. Um, the underwriting is an absence of space and time. I don't know where I am in a scene. I don't know who's in the scene. I don't know what's going on, especially for new authors,
Yeah.
right? Like, and the overwriting for new authors tends to be, you are giving me too much backstory, you're giving me too much of their history, you're giving me too much that I don't care about as the reader. So like, that
Yep.
doesn't matter in what the reader's doing. So those are just two kind of easy ways to, if you're nervous about these, underwriting, like, does the reader know where they are and who is around them? Can they visualize the scene? If they can't visualize the scene, you've probably underwritten it.
Right.
Overwriting, are you breaking all of the dialogue exchanges with paragraphs of backstory and remembrances that are taking all the energy away from the scene? Yeah.
Yep.
Would you push back on that? Would you not say that's true? That's what I encounter.
I think I think that that is a very common
Yeah.
problem. I would not put the percentage quite as high as where you have it.
Okay. So maybe like,
So,
3 out of 4.
oh
I'm
my
just kidding.
gosh, that's the same. Um, I'd say it's about 50-50. I
Okay.
think
That's
the
fair.
other side of it
Yeah.
is
Like 8
when
out of 16.
yes, 8 out of 16. When an author thinks they're explaining something, but it's not coming across to the reader.
Yeah.
It's an unintentional thing. So for the for the example that Jeff was giving about like you're spending too much time or you're not spending enough time on time and space. The easiest way to find this is, guess what I'm going to say? Guess what I'm going to say? Drum roll. Color coding.
Yeah.
Color coding is always the
Hooray.
answer.
Yeah.
Colors help. Okay, so in this case, so usually when I'm talking about color coding, I'm talking about like go through and highlight each character in a different color or highlight the emotions of the scene or whatever. In this case, if you're having trouble with reader burden, you want to go through and you want to highlight everything that is not the dialogue. You are going to highlight your world building. I would, it's me, I love color. I would probably highlight world building in one color and descriptions of where the characters are and who's in the scene. Dialogue tags are also part of this, not body language, but the dialogue tag itself. Laura said, Jeff said, they said, we said, whatever it is, right? Like the tags themselves, and then read the scene solely from the perspective of the non-quotation, non-body language to see, is there enough stuff? Does this tell too much of a story? Is it too much stuff?
It's
If
good
you're
advice.
finding that
Yeah.
you have 17 pages, I don't know why 15 and 17 are like my numbers today,
Yeah.
but they are. If you have this much stuff, you are probably overwriting your story,
Yeah.
and you should pare that back. If you don't have enough of that, if you don't have enough, he said, she said, they said, if you don't have enough of they're in this space, we don't know what it is, you're probably underwriting.
Yeah.
So that's the easiest way to take care of the 50% of the under overwriting.
Yeah. And here's why this question is difficult, because there isn't a right answer. There isn't a like, oh, this is the maximum amount of underwriting, this is the maximum amount of overwriting, because part of this is your author voice, right?
Yeah,
Like the amount that you underwrite, the amount that you overwrite, like the amount of detail you give, the amount of character interaction, all of that comes into like, this is what your quote unquote author voice, or like, if I read a book by this author, this is what I can expect. So like James Patterson, um, you know, kind of a very happy middle of underwriting and overwriting, very low reader burden. You know exactly what's happening all the time. And they're meant to be read fast and quick, and that's what a Patterson novel is, right? Like Roses Are Red is not supposed to make you think deeply about the setting and the scene or the themes. It's supposed to
right.
like, we're chasing a psycho killer, and that's Alex Cross is going to catch him, right? Like that's
Yes.
and that's Patterson's voice. If Patterson tried to
Well, it's
write,
Patterson and his tribe of writers
okay,
voice.
that's fair. I wasn't going to say that, but it is
But he,
Patterson's voice. He
right.
established it, and now he has other people do it for him.
And
Yeah,
he
more power
established
to
it
you, man.
so well that he was able to get a team of writers
Yeah,
to write
to write his stuff.
under
Yeah,
his right. Carolyn Keene as a pen name also
yeah,
was the same way. The first books were probably all written by the same person, and then they wanted more. So it was like, if you could write in this style, you're in.
yeah. But very like, very clean balance in overwriting and underwriting. Whereas like, you read like I don't know. The classic example we always come back to on these podcasts is David Foster Wallace's Infinite Jest. People love it, but the reader burden is super high because you never really know where you are in space and time in the story. You're like, wait, where am I? And it takes you like, half of the chapter just to figure out like, what is happening? Where am I and what is happening? People love it. He has a very unique and distinct voice.
Some
And
people love it.
some people love it, but like that's his voice, right? Like, Hemingway can be at times very underwritten. Like there's so much dialogue that at times he's very there's just not a lot of reflective prose in there, and some people absolutely love it, some people hate it. To go back to the example you were using before, right? Like it is not
Hmm.
mass market balanced fiction, and it's not intended to be,
Right.
and that's who it is. Or like, you were talking about Tolstoy, like, there are these like, especially Victorian age authors, that everything is overwritten. Like,
Right.
like Victor Hugo. Oh my gosh, so much overwritten. Like, there's so
Right.
much I don't need to know about that you
Right.
were telling me in this story. But that's the voice of that author, and people love that.
Yeah, it was also the time
It
period.
was
We've
also the
talked
time
about
period. It's
this
the
in the
genre he's writing in. Yeah,
yeah,
but
we
it's
talked about
that.
that in past
Yeah, but I
podcasts as
say all
well.
that to say is that like, there's not a right or wrong answer here. You just have to know that like, the author voice you choose kind of will help readers decide whether they want to write your book, whether they want to read your books or not, right? Like, so if you want to be a mass market writer, if you want to be a Nick Hornby who's cranking out like fun, sometimes misogynistic rom-coms, right? Then keep it balanced, right? Like, I need to know where I am in every scene. I need to know who's there. I need to like, and don't go deep into like the background of each character. I don't care. I want to be in the moment right now,
Right,
present, having a good time. If you want to write a James Patterson thriller, keep me in the moment right now. Don't tell me about Alex Cross's childhood. I don't care. I want to
right.
know how he's
Low
solving
reader
this
burden.
mystery. Yeah. But if
Low
you
reader
want if
burden.
you want to write lit fic, if you want to write the Dutch House, then you got to overwrite some. I got to go
So,
deep into like who these characters are and like what's happening in their inner lives. And yeah.
okay, so this is where I'm going to push back.
Okay.
So, overwriting is there are two ways to overwrite.
Yes.
There's overwrite, which creates reader burden, which is you're talking about things that are not important to your story.
Yeah.
And then there's overwriting, which is actually very positive to your story, especially if you're writing lit fic.
Oh, see,
So
I would say them both overwriting, but one is overwriting done strategically and well, and one is overwriting done by accident.
yeah, so the term of overwriting is so I would want to break it down because when we have the same word for something that's both positive and negative,
That's
I think
true.
it becomes very difficult for a writer to
And
understand,
people
especially
get
a new
mad at
writer.
us. Yeah.
They're like, how are you saying it's good news? Right. So I would say overwriting and underwriting are reader burden. You're
Yeah.
doing something incorrectly. If you are intentionally providing extra background, extra information about your story, your world building, whatever is more to your author voice, the way that I would recommend that authors figure out if their writing style, and we'll call it a verbose writing style,
Hmm.
lots and lots of words. If it's overwriting versus if it's just your voice, looking at the purpose of the details that you are providing.
Hmm.
If you are writing them because you like what it says, that is very different than
Very
writing
different.
it because it benefits your story and it benefits your reader.
Hmm.
Jeff, you and I have this back and forth whenever I edit something for you. There's always a scene in your stories where I can tell you wrote this scene because you liked it,
I'm having a great time.
but it's not hitting me as a reader in the same way.
Hmm.
I'm not enjoying it as much as you are, right? Like I make a little note in the margin and I say, I know you love this. I, as a reader, am recommending, as your editor, am recommending that you cut this, but it's your story, your voice. You choose to keep it or you don't choose to keep it. When you're writing those, you really have to think about what's the impact on the reader. Is this helping them understand the story? If it is actually helping them understand or enjoy the story, yes, by all means, leave it. But if
Hmm.
you just wrote it because you were having fun and you wanted that detail in there,
Having a
it's
great
probably
time.
time to cut it.
Yeah.
So,
And but again, that's part of my author voice is that I have scenes.
yes,
They're usually big cast scenes, and this is a choice I've made as an author. I have big cast scenes where 3 to 4 characters are talking, and it's high energy, and it's usually some kind of nonsense. And I
that's not
accept as an
the
author
scenes.
that is those are the ones you're always like, I don't like this.
No,
That
it's really the three-person scene that I'm like, no, get this out of here.
yeah,
Put
that's
it
what I
on
mean. Yeah, it's that
nonsense.
big cast, like yeah,
Oh, that's right. You consider three big. I
I
don't
do.
consider big until four.
Yeah,
So
I think of 3 is big.
yeah,
Anything over 2 is big cast.
yeah,
In my world. So it's that like, but I've accepted as an author, like some readers aren't going to like this, and I'm okay with that because this is part of how I write.
yeah,
This is part of what's unique that I bring to the table that other authors don't bring to the table. And so,
absolutely.
you know,
And I
yeah.
think that's really important in finding your voice
Hmm.
and knowing that. So, and here's the thing about quirks like that in stories. If you build enough trust with your reader, they're going to keep reading, even if they come across something that they don't like.
a hundred
So
percent.
in Jeff's books, when I get to that scene where I'm like, oh, this scene again, I just skip ahead to the next scene because I know it's not going to affect
You're
my
like, he's not going to do
understanding
this
of the
forever.
story,
Yeah.
right? Like I just skim through those pages till I get back and then I invest. But Jeff has built enough trust with me as a reader that I'm in for it. Even the best authors do this. I've talked before about Stephen King and how his early works are like things that I just love.
Hmm.
They're the horror of it, the whatever, but there are still places in his stories where I'm like, why are we talking about this? And I'll skip a page or two and then I'm right back into the story. But
Yeah.
there's enough trust between him as an author and me as a reader that I can do that because I know that when I get back to the next page of the story, because he's not writing just for me. He's writing for the masses. I happen to enjoy it. So there's some trust built there.
Yeah.
So bottom line, find your voice. If you're worried about it, use some color coding, use a scale of why is this in here? Why isn't this in here? To figure
Mhm.
out whether or not you want to put stuff in. Let other people read it. If you're getting a ton of feedback from people that are like, hey, I don't understand this, or hey, I'm exhausted by this. If those are the people you want buying your book, maybe listen to them. If you don't care, do what you're going to do.
Yeah. 100%. I
Yeah,
think, yeah, I think it's, well, the reason we can't give a like straight answer of like 70%, like the reason I can't give an honest math answer is because it's not math, it's art. So
right,
like, you can, if you like it and it's going to turn some readers off, but you like it, then keep it, right?
right.
Like, yeah, and nobody can fault you for it. Just don't be surprised when people are like, I don't like this. You're like, yeah, well, yeah, it's not for you, right? Like,
Right.
so it's that, yeah.
Right.
Anyway,
If you're writing for you and this is your joy or your pain or whatever it is that you all write authors write for, lean into it, love
yeah,
it, celebrate
100%.
it. And going back to the editor relationship, as an editor, my job is not to tell you how to write your book.
No,
My job is to tell you how your writing is coming across to somebody who didn't write it.
yeah,
And then it's your job to decide how you want to respond to that.
yeah,
If you want to respond to it to make it more mass market, then your editor's voice should ring pretty heavy. If you are writing your Sun Also Rises, then write your Sun Also Rises.
yeah, do it. Go for it.
After you're dead, people will buy it.
Yeah. Someone will like it. Um, all right. Anything else we need to talk about? We've covered all of our
We
questions.
covered all of our
We've
questions.
done
They
all of our
were
things.
great questions.
Great questions. Yeah.
Way to go, dialoguers.
I'm going to do a commercial. If you want to ask us questions in the future, you can go to patreon.com/Jeff Elkins or go to dialoguedoctor.com and click on the community button and sign up for $5 a month. You can be a dialoger and jump into the Slack. And when we say, hey, do you want questions? Do you have questions? You can ask us questions. We also, we give out those free sessions kind of once a quarter. Dialoggers get that sign up sheet first. If you're ever wondering, like, why is this sign up sheet already completely filled by the time it gets to the newsletter, or there's like 2 spaces left? It's because dialoggers get it first. So,
Yeah.
yeah, come sign up, be a part of the community. We would
And
love
if
to
you're part
have
of the community, you don't have to wait for a Q&A post to
you.
ask
You
your
literally just
questions.
ask us whenever you want.
Just ask it. Jeff is
Yeah,
very good about being on Slack and responding to you.
sometimes too
I'm
good.
more of a Slack sleeper, and I like when I'm not sleeping, I respond to Slack.
I think of you as like a sneak attack slacker. You're
Yes.
like, no one expected the sneak attack of Laura in this Slack, but all of a sudden,
All of a sudden
what?
I'm there.
There's Laura. Yeah, she's
Yep.
like
I'm a
you're like a
Slack
Slack
ninja.
ninja. Yeah,
Yes.
Slack ninja.
Yes, that's my superpower.
Yeah,
I'm a Slack ninja.
yeah.
All right.
All right.
This was
Anything else?
fantastic.
Yeah. All right. This has been fun. All right. Yeah. Go write something, everybody. I'm turning off the recording now. We can talk a little bit more after.